Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1694 AN. Today's date is October 19th, 2018, and the title of the episode is Countries Around the World Are Already Transitioning Their Economies. Now, before we get started, I wanted to talk about the patriots that are fighting for our country. Every generation seems to have its own president. For some, it was Kennedy. For others, Nixon, Carter, Bush, or Reagan. Each seems to define an era. Our generation will have Donald Trump as their president. He was the one that took a shattered and broken Washington swamp and drained it of everything he saw that was bad. He will be remembered as a maverick, the man who drained the swamp. He overcame fierce opposition from Democrats and Republicans alike, a corrupt media, misinformation, and fake news, to become the 45th president of the United States. Under his administration, America has seen its first major tax reform in 30 years, a renegotiation of the globalist trade deals, the termination of TPP, the process of getting rid of the central banking system, and maybe even resetting the system to make it a people's system. His way has so far shaken the cobwebs from all corners of government, and he's only halfway through. Who knows what the next half will bring? To celebrate these first achievements in a fitting and lasting way, Noble Gold has produced an exclusive commemorative President Trump 2020 Freedom Coin. Minted from 1 troy ounce of .999 fine silver, the Trump Freedom Coin is a beautiful and striking coin. The guys at Noble Gold tell me that these are being talked about all over the country. If you're a Trump supporter or you like the perfect gift for someone who is, you'll be in good company. To order yours, go to TrumpCoin2020.com and put in the code X22 and you'll receive $5 off per coin for a limited time. TrumpCoin2020.com and put in the discount code X22 and you could be holding one of these fabulous Trump coins too. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, we've been talking about the transition of the global economy, and this transition is not just going to happen here in the United States, it's happening around the world. Remember, the central banking system has pretty much engulfed the world in their massive debt system, and the world is about to transition away from this. And the entire push for this is coming from Trump, the Patriots, where they're going to remove the central bank. It's coming from China and Russia, where they're already starting to trade using their own currencies, bypassing the central bank note. And there are many other countries that are also starting to do this. They have begun the transition, and we're going to be getting to that a little bit later in this report. But what we are seeing right now worldwide is that the entire economic system is coming down on itself and imploding. And we're seeing it in many different parts of the economy. Now, we see it in autos, we see it in housing. We know the statistical numbers, they're completely manipulated. You can't even go by them. They've been manipulated for a very long time. And when we start to look to see how companies are doing and what they've been doing, and we start to see, businesses like retail, we start to understand what is happening around the world. Now, remember, to push automobiles, to push houses, to push education, everyone pretty much has to take out a loan. I mean, in today's market, very few can just go out and pay cash for a car, for a house, or for an education. And they have to go and take out a loan and become indebted to whatever they're trying to do here. And when people start to realize that they can't take out any more debt, it's just too much, they can't pay it off, they don't do these things anymore. And we're starting to see this in the automobile industry. Now, in the past, we've been covering this, and we've known and we've been following it, and we've seen that the automobile industry, they have been channel stuffing dealerships, which means they just fill up the lots with as many cars as possible. They count those as sales. And then they give incentives to the dealers to try to move the cars. So when you do this, manufacturing, of course, is up. Sales look up, but all the cars are just sitting there. We're running into a problem right now. And actually, before I start this, to move the cars, they also bring in the subprime, subprime, and anyone that has a heartbeat to move these cars out of the lots. And then all of a sudden delinquencies move up because people really can't afford them. Well, those days are over because we're running out of people. This is the problem. And they already went through the subprime, and anyone with a heartbeat. And around the world, people are losing their jobs. We see austerity being pushed all over the place. And we're seeing that the automobile sales in Europe and in the United States, they are declining very, very rapidly. BMW, their stock is tumbled. Mercedes, the same thing is happening. And we also see it here in the U.S. Car sales are horrific right now. We also see that existing home sales, they have dropped for the 7th straight month in a row. Now, think about this for a second. During the spring and the summer, this is the best time to sell a home. It's warm out, the grass is green. People say, hey, you know something? Let's move before the school year. Let's get into a house before our kids go back to school, get settled in. It's a lot easier to move in the warm weather than it is in winter when you have snow and ice. And during this spring and summer season, what have we seen? We've seen the housing market decline. Now, U.S. home builder stocks, they're seeing the worst time ever since 2007. August data, that was revised lower. September plunged down by 3.4%. This is the biggest drop since February of 2016. And when we look back in time, we can see that 7 months in a row, existing home sales is just terrible. I mean, there's no other way to explain this. It's just awful. I mean, when was the last time we saw this? We got to go all the way back to 2013. And then before that, during the Great Recession, when we were coming into it. And here we are once again. Remember what the central bankers have done. They have propped up the housing industry. With the government's help, they propped up the auto industry. With the government's help, they propped up the college industry, where people have to take out student loans to go to college. And what are we finding out from all these different areas? Well, it's all starting to fall apart. Think about it. Kids are going to school. They're coming out with all this debt. They can't find the jobs, the high-paying jobs that are promised to them. So they're getting these part-time, low-paying jobs. They can't pay back their student loans. And then the government has to offer these programs to help them pay the loans off so they don't default on them, which you still have to pay them, but they want people to continually pay on these loans. And what happens is they say, okay, how much you making? All right, you're at a part-time job. What we'll do is we'll recalculate it and you'll have 30 years to pay this off, or 25 years, whatever it is. And this is because they cannot find good jobs. Yes, they're telling us there's all these jobs out there. And again, if this is the case, we would see supply and demand kick in. We would say, okay, there's a huge demand, but the supply, non-existent. And what do? They raise the salary to attract individuals, to make people become educated in that job and then pay them a really good salary. We're not seeing this at all. So where are all these jobs? Maybe in the service industry, maybe in restaurants, but those are declining too. So we're not seeing these great jobs that everyone's talking about. And once again, I do have to mention, if you ever worked in a corporation, it's something they called open recs, where you, in a department, you have open recs where you're going to hire someone, but you never want to give them up. You always want to hold on to them. And sometimes a department has, 10, 15 or so open recs. And you don't want to say, hey, listen, we don't need anyone in this position, so we don't need these open recs. They always keep them, and they interview people even though they don't hire. Actually, sometimes management says, continue to interview people, but we're in a hiring freeze right now, so you can't hire anyone. But the stats show that these companies have all of these positions open. It's very misleading. Now, countries, they have been preparing to transition away from the dollar for a very long time. And what they were hoping, if we go back a couple of years, they were hoping the central bank system would be transitioned to China. And this is what they were preparing. That's why they moved all the manufacturing. This is why the deep state was moving everything out of the United States, working with the central bank, because they knew eventually what was going to happen is the United States was going to completely implode on itself economically. And they had to move everything out of the United States to bring the United States down to the level of all the other countries. And if they could do this and then somehow get rid of the Constitution, this would be a huge plus to the central bank and the deep state. They hate the Constitution. They don't like people having rights. They don't like this at all. So during that time period, they thought they were going to have this event, and they thought, oh, we'll transition after the war, and everything will start up in China, just like it did during World War II with Bretton Woods. After the war, everyone gave the United States their gold. Then the Fed took over, and they took the gold. Most likely, we have no gold today. And then in 1971, they wanted more control. So we came off of Bretton Woods because countries saying, you're creating a lot of currency, and we would like our gold back. And of course, they called it, people in the gold market who are speculating, and we had to stop them. So that's why we had to come off the gold standard. Well, that's the story they told us. That's not what really happened. They didn't want to give back the gold because most likely they didn't have any. And the central bank wanted all the control of creating as much currency as they possibly could and let the government borrow as much as they wanted. This way they can corrupt them even further. But we can see that Russia, China, a lot of the BRIC nations, they have been transitioning for a very long time. Russia and China, they have been preparing to ditch the dollar, but things have changed right now. Now they're pivoting to get rid of the central bank. Now Russia, they have taken control over their central bank. They dictate what they want done. Yes, it's still a private Western central bank, but they control it completely. Russia has a very little bit of debt right now. China has a lot of debt. They've been using the central bank's easy money to build everything. And I think what they're going to do once the system comes down is they'll have everything built, but they'll have gold to back everything up. And then hopefully with the central bank gone, they're just going to say, you know what, we're not even paying for all this debt. So many nations, they have gone public with their intention to ditch the dollar in part or in whole right now. And this is what we've been seeing in the last couple of months here. Europe unveils special purpose vehicle to bypass SWIFT. They're going to create their own payment system because they're getting ready to move away from the Federal Reserve note. They know that this whole thing is coming apart and coming down quickly. This was planned, but things are changing right now. Russia says time has come to ditch the dollar. European powers prepare to ditch the dollar in trade with Iran. Russia and India ditch dollar in military deals. Russia's finance minister says we may abandon the dollar in oil trade as it's becoming too risky. Venezuela ditches US dollar, will use euros for international trade, and then all of a sudden they started with the cryptocurrency, the El Petro. So we can see that everything is changing right now, and countries, they are slowly transitioning away from the central bank note. And they're doing it slowly so it doesn't disrupt everything, and they're blamed for bringing down the entire system. None of these countries want to be blamed for that, and that's why they're moving so slowly to get rid of what they have. Because if they just dumped all their treasuries, they dumped their reserves, well, guess what the news would report? Well, Russia just dumped all their treasuries, all the reserves, or China dumped all their reserves, all their treasuries, and they crashed the market. They don't want to be blamed for this, so they do it very slowly over the many months. And they make sure that they separate themselves. And while they're doing this, they create bilateral trades with other countries. They start using their own currencies. Those countries that they're dealing with, they use their own currency, and both countries now are bypassing the dollar completely. And we already see that Trump pretty much is on the same page as all this, where he's setting up now bilateral trades with all these different countries: Europe, Japan, Canada, Mexico, getting rid of the globalist system. So what we see happening right now is we are heading towards this major transition. Countries have been preparing for this. Russia and China, they have a huge amount of gold because they need that for confidence. Because once the Federal Reserve note dies, countries are going to be scrambling, and both of these countries are going to say, don't worry, we have gold. We have the confidence builder here. You don't have to worry. And that's why they've been accumulating so much gold. This is why countries were asking for their gold back. And they're accumulating gold, except for the U.S. So we're going to be going through this transition. Yes, there are going to be people that are hurt. I mean, go back to the 70s when we came off the gold standard onto the petrodollar. Those people that can remember this, you saw long gas lines. Jobs were very hard to come by. And people struggled during the 70s. It wasn't easy. And then things got a little bit easier as we moved into the late 70s into the 80s when credit started to unfreeze and interest rates came down. People were able to use credit to purchase things. Now that's in the beginning of a central bank system. We're not there right now. We're at the opposite end where we have a huge amount of debt. People have credit up to the wazoo. They're so burdened with debt right now. Most households can't even function without a credit card. And the world is flooded with debt all over the place, and it can't be paid back. The amount of tax receipts coming into all of these governments, well, they're not keeping up with the amount of debt that they're accumulating. And the central bankers knew this over time, that their system will eventually break down and it will crash. And right before that happens, what they like to do is they like to have an event so they can completely cover it up. This time they don't have this. And they're running into problems. So get prepared, get ready. We're going to be going through this transition. And for many, it's going to be a little difficult. For others, it's going to be a little bit easier because they've been preparing for this. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.